Chapter 3 deals with researching and writing a literature review. Uh, this chapter was very hands-on in describing a particular process by which the authors suggest you organize your information. And if that works for you, then I suggest you pay really close attention and follow it closely. But just from a content like material perspective, this wasn't the lengthiest or more involved type of chapter. So this is going to be a relatively short video, which I'm sure you're thankful of. So at this point, we've discussed selecting a topic, defining the problem, as well as formulating a testable hypothesis in chapter 2. So this chapter goes over that third step, reviewing the literature. So the purpose of a literature review is to, help you familiarize yourself with the entire body of research on that particular topic, because this is your chosen topic that you're passionate and knowledgeable about. And so in order for you to exhibit that knowledge, you need to know what has been written and studied in regards to your topic. And exploring the literature will help uncover related research. And this is also the process by which you better formulate your own research questions and or hypotheses. Is how you know like what control variables that you need to control for, what possible extraneous and intervening variables you need to look out for. You get all of that information from doing this literature review. What is it not? It's not a study by study, article by article description of studies previously done. It's not a restatement of studies previously done. It's not a brief overview of the articles. When you're actually writing out your literature review, it is kind of your own spin on this synthesis of knowledge. And that's just, this little, graphic, I think is really helpful for you to refer back to when you start writing your own literature review. Because if you are falling into the trap of doing one of those things, just, remind yourself that this is not what a literature review is. But the chapter actually kind of begins by, emphasizing, how do you even go about starting your literature review? And so they give you some good ideas of like how to explore, use your library databases. CSUB, separates it by social sciences and sociology, and gives you some possible databases that have articles and journals related to the discipline. You also can just use general search engines. I'm a big believer in, as long as you have keywords. Google Scholar is very helpful because of how it's set up to show you other research that has cited the same source, as well as the sources that study has cited. So I think it's just very easy to kind of move through the links. Your book talks about interlibrary loan. Obviously for this course, like this would be different if this was a master's, if this was your doctorate, I would expect you to, be reading the books and not just the articles. But, obviously in this course, for the span of this assignment, no one's expecting you to read books, and certainly no one's expecting you to use interlibrary loan, just because, for these assignments, that's not necessary. But it's always, I guess, nice to know that if there was a book out there that you wanted to read and our library didn't have it and you couldn't buy it on your own, that, interlibrary loan systems are also an option. In terms of how to write a literature review, I think that this is a really helpful, straightforward video. It's not necessarily that I agree with everything that he's saying, and I'm not saying that you can't write your literature review in other ways, but certainly if you are looking for another video to just walk you through it, that's a good one. There's also really good resources on the Writing Resource Center website. I give you a link to one of those right there. But, if you're looking at what your textbook suggests, let's start with their first suggestion, which is you need to read everything on your topic. Once again, if this were your MA, if this was, your doctorate, I'd agree with this. But for this class, what I will say is that you need to read more than just the 5 articles that you ultimately select to be on your annotated bibliography. Sometimes I can tell that students just chose the first 5 that popped up in their search engine. The articles aren't really closely related, or they're only tangentially related. Some of them are very weak and don't seem to be helping strengthen the student's question. So just know that when you're choosing your sources for your annotated bibliography, they need to be the 5 best articles that you read, not necessarily the only 5 articles that you read. As your book notes, annotated bibliography is a good means of organizing what you have read and discovered and how it's important for your topic. It's why I'm assigning it as a proposal activity, because I do think it really helps prepare you for the longer version that you will write at the end of the semester. So as you're writing your annotation, what should you consider putting in there? The focus, aim of the study. If they are particularly relying on a theory or a theoretical framework to guide their research design, certainly to guide their research, certainly giving some background of the overall research design, the population and the sample. Some sense of their results, as well as their main discussion points. And then, your own notes and observations as far as how it relates to your topic, your question, your study. What does it look like, the annotated bibliography? It has a full citation and then is followed by that annotation. In terms of actual, structure, I found you like a little, image here. You have the hanging indent. The citation itself is single space, but the annotation is double spaced. As I said in your assignment, the citation format is up to you. Obviously, I strongly recommend ASA, but if there is another citation style that you are more comfortable using, maybe MLA, then that's fine with me. Just be consistent. And for this assignment, because of how the assignment is structured, you want to make sure that you have a clickable hyperlink for every source. So at the end of your citation, just make sure that you have that clickable hyperlink before going into your annotation. If it works for you, consider using the guiding table and or conceptual graph that your textbook spends a lot of space discussing, pages 61 to 72. I'm not requiring it, and kind of like I said in the chapter 2 video, I don't require things that I don't do in my own writing. It just doesn't feel entirely right to make it seem imperative that you do it if I know that I don't do it. But at the same time, I always encourage students to find the writing tools and resources that are most helpful and useful to them. So particularly if you're a visual person, if you're the type of person that really likes to have like all the pertinent information from a source, like in a very organized, easily accessible, visually clear type of format, then check out those table and conceptual graph possibilities and see if that perhaps works for you. It really could prove to be a useful step. Some final points just about writing your literature review, not just the annotated bibliography. Your textbook emphasizes that people have individual ways of organizing their literature reviews. One of the more popular ways is you narrow down your broad topic to your own specific niche. So you go broad to specific. Sometimes people use subheadings to kind of separate out their literature review by topic. The key is to just be logical. I really think that textbook prompt about how would you explain the topic to a friend on the phone, what would you emphasize, what order would you present it, like that is a really good way, I think, to think through the logic and clarity of your literature review. My own warning is your literature review should not be your annotated bibliography in paragraph form. This goes back to that image that I showed on like the first couple of slides, right? It is not a source by source summary. You should not discuss each source separately. That is not a literature review. Instead, as the textbook suggests, you really want to focus on patterns. What do studies and sources have in common? But then also pay attention to what they independently contribute. How do they differ? Are they distinct from one another? Like, how do they build the base of knowledge? And that's how you should talk about it, in terms of those patterns and distinctions, not in terms of describing the individual sources. Like I said, if your literature review ultimately just reads as an expanded version of your annotated bibliography, you have done it wrong. The textbook suggests ending your literature review with the statement of your hypothesis, with both the null and the alternative hypothesis presented. And if you do not have a hypothesis because your research is inductive and therefore you only have an open-ended question, they still say you should end with a discussion of the significance of your question. So your literature review ends with either a discussion of the significance of your question or a discussion, a statement of your hypotheses and your kind of explanation as to why that is your hypothesis. Some final tips about writing your literature review that come out of the Research Workshop 3.1, page 83. And like I said, this might just be helpful to flag for when it's your time to write your literature review at the end of the semester. But, you want to look out for things similar to or different from all or most of the articles. Write down 3 or 4 points that you notice are the same or different across all studies, because that might be a good way to organize your literature review. Organize it in paragraphs from like thinking broadly to specific. Write each point in its own paragraph with simple sentences, then expand using information from the annotated bibliography. So this is a way that you can kind of make sure that you aren't just talking about one source per paragraph. Very end of the literature review should have some argument as to why your study is important. And as I just discussed, end by either stating your own question or your own hypothesis. And so, in order to notice those patterns, to notice those similarities, to notice those distinctions, that type of critical thinking begins with critical reading of the literature. And so, your book makes a point that you want to be engaged in active reading and not just passive reading. And so active reading involves looking at, the concepts, theories, and perspectives researchers are using. You want to question their intentions and their decisions. You want to look at the methodologies employed, and once again, question decisions regarding population, sample, method by comparing it to other studies. You want to, pay attention to, what questions come up for you, concerns that you may have, things that interest you and excite you. So you are paying attention as you read, right? And you're trying to make those linkages and connections even as you are engaging with the material, even as you are just initially taking it in. Now, one thing to note is that the literature review is not the same as a systematic review. A systematic review of literature is actually a form of scientific study itself. It's a form of content analysis. And it's an attempt to bring together every scientific study on a specific topic and draw conclusions from it. Your book describes the 4 ways that it differs from a literature review. The focus is different. Selection bias is reduced because you have a much broader, the whole point is you're supposed to be analyzing, all of the studies related to the topic. You're not just picking out a select few the way you do with the literature review. There are rigorous steps and procedures, and that's because assessment and analysis of studies are involved. Now, meta-analyses are similar to systematic reviews, except they also try to statistically recalculate the data from original studies. So the main distinction between a systematic review of the literature and a meta-analysis is that with systematic review, you're kind of just systematically addressing how a topic has been studied, what conclusions have been made, how data was collected. In a meta-analysis, you are once again, you have this sample of studies, or this population of studies that have been done on your topic, but now you're also basically redoing the analysis section. And so that is it for the literature review. Like I said, a lot of this is just not going to be very useful, or not useful, but it's not going to be very pertinent to you until we start getting to the part of the semester where you are working on your own literature review. But certainly the part of this chapter that addresses the annotated bibliography should prove to be very useful to you during this module because you have the annotated bibliography assignment that is due at the end of these 2 weeks. So that is it for chapter 3.